Holt's boot connected with Ranger's ribs before anyone in that barn had time to process what they were watching. Not a kick born of panic. Not a reflexive flinch from a man who was afraid. A deliberate, slow, contemptuous tap of a steel-toed boot into the side of a dog who had done nothing except exist in the same room as someone who thought he owned it. Ranger didn't yelp. He didn't lunge. He didn't even blink. He just locked. And the woman standing beside him, 22 years old, dark hair loose past her shoulders, looked at Holt the way a door looks at the last person who will ever open it. Before we go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on that bell, because what happens next in this barn is something you will not see coming. Now let's go. Raina Voss had not planned to be at the Crestfield State Fairgrounds on a Thursday afternoon. She had plans, real plans. The kind that involves silence, a decent cup of coffee, and approximately 0 crowds. But her brother Cole had sent her 3 text messages in a row, each one shorter than the last, each one carrying that specific pressure that only a younger sibling knows how to apply. The first said he was competing in the Junior Welding Championship. The second said it would mean a lot if she came. The third said, never mind, she was probably busy. She came. Ranger moved at her left heel through the fairground entrance, stride fluid, automatic, effortless. His matte black operational vest sat flush against his tan and black coat. Above the right shoulder strap, in small, subdued lettering, the vest read, "Working Canine, do not approach." His amber eyes tracked every moving body without settling on any one of them. He wasn't tense. He was present. There was a difference, and most people never understood what that difference felt like until they found themselves on the wrong side of it. Raina wore no rank, no badge. Nothing that identified her as anything other than a young woman with long dark hair and an olive green fitted top tucked into military camo cargo pants. She looked, at first glance, like someone's athletic older sister showing up out of obligation. That was intentional. That was always intentional. They cleared the main gate and moved along the edge of the midway crowd toward the exhibition pavilion where Cole's competition was staged. The air smelled like fried food and generator exhaust, and the specific nervous energy of teenagers who had been practicing something for months. Ranger's ears moved once to the left, cataloging a burst of music from a nearby booth, filing it, moving on. That was when Holt stepped into their path. He was early 30s, wide through the shoulders, wearing a county fair security contractor polo with a laminated badge on a lanyard. He carried himself like someone who had decided before leaving the house that morning that he was going to make at least one person's day harder. He looked at Raina, then looked down at Ranger, and something shifted behind his eyes. Not fear, something closer to opportunity. "Ma'am." His voice had that particular flatness of someone who uses the word ma'am as punctuation rather than respect. "Dogs aren't permitted inside the exhibition pavilion." Raina didn't slow down. "He's a working canine, federally certified." Holt moved to stay in her path. "Doesn't matter what he is. Site policy." She stopped, not because she was rattled, because she made a decision. She reached into the front pocket of her cargo pants and produced a small laminated card, held it out without comment. Holt took it, looked at it the way someone looks at a receipt they've already decided they aren't going to honor, handed it back. "This doesn't override what I just told you. That card supersedes site policy under federal working animal statutes," Raina said. Her voice was the temperature of concrete in January. "You can verify it with your supervisor, or step aside." Behind Holt, Two other security contractors materialized from the crowd, like they'd been waiting for a signal. Mercer was mid-20s, soft around the edges, the kind of man who laughed when his friend laughed, and stopped when his friend stopped. Dax was younger still, maybe 20, already pulling his phone out with that specific casual motion that means someone wants to be recording without looking like they want to be recording. Mercer tilted his head at Ranger. "He vaccinated?" Ranger's left ear turned toward Mercer's voice. That was all. "Of course," Reyna said. "Doesn't look like a service animal," Dax offered, not looking up from his phone. "Looks like a regular dog." "He's not a service animal," Reyna said. "He's a working canine. Different classification, different documentation, different legal standing. If you don't know the difference, that's a training gap worth addressing." Mercer blinked. Dax's phone tilted slightly upward. Holt handed the card back. "I'm going to need you to wait here while I radio this in." "Fine," Reyna said. She stood exactly where she was. Ranger sat at her left heel and watched Holt make a show of unclipping his radio. The radio call lasted 90 seconds. There was no response that changed anything. Holt clipped the radio back and rotated his jaw like he was chewing on the outcome. "All right," he said finally. "You can go in. But if that dog creates any kind of disruption, you're both out." "Understood," Reyna said. She walked past him. Ranger matched her stride. Dax tracked them with his phone until they cleared the pavilion entrance. Holt watched them go, turned to Mercer with a half-smile that said, this conversation was not finished. Cole was backstage in the junior exhibitors prep area, a converted equipment barn behind the main stage with steel walls and folding tables and the ambient hum of teenagers rehearsing things they had already rehearsed 40 times. He saw his sister come through the side door and immediately straightened up like someone trying to look like they hadn't been nervous. "You came," he said. "I said I would. You said you'd try." "Same thing." Cole grinned and looked down at Ranger. "He looks different without the full gear." "He's still working," Reyna said. "Don't let the vest fool you." Cole nodded, not entirely sure what that meant, but accepting it the way younger siblings accept the parts of their older siblings' lives that they're only allowed to see the edges of. He introduced her to his team. 3 other teenagers who all immediately looked at Ranger the way every human being looks at a German shepherd in a tactical vest. Equal parts fascinated and cautious. Ranger sat near the wall beside the door, ears moving, cataloging the room. Reyna found a folding chair near the supply crates and sat. Cole disappeared back into the staging line with his team. The barn was loud and warm and full of the focused chaos that precedes any kind of competition. For approximately 8 minutes, everything was fine. Then the door opened and Holt walked in. Mercer was behind him. Dax brought up the rear, clipboard in hand, trying to look official. Holt scanned the barn with the authority of a man who had just been handed a role he intended to fully inhabit. "Security sweep before the ceremony," he announced to no one in particular. "All non-competing personnel need to clear to the designated spectator areas." Most of the competitors and their parents began moving toward the exits. Cole looked back at his sister. She gave him a small nod. He left with his team. The barn emptied in under 2 minutes. Reyna stayed in her chair near the supply crates. Ranger stayed at the wall beside the door. Holt looked at her. His expression did not change. "You need to clear out too." "My brother is competing," Reyna said. "I was told to wait here for the side entrance to open." "Who told you that?" "The stage coordinator." Holt looked at Mercer. Mercer shrugged. Holt looked back at Reyna with something that had graduated from inconvenience to decision. "I don't have any record of that." "You can verify it with the stage coordinator," Reyna said. "Her name is probably on your clipboard." Dax turned the clipboard slightly away from her. "We'll get that sorted," Holt said, in the tone of someone who has no intention of sorting anything. "For now, you wait outside." Raina looked at him for a moment. Then she stood. Not quickly. Not in a way that suggested she was being moved. Just stood, slowly, and picked up Ranger's lead from the floor. That was when Dax reached past her and shoved the steel equipment case off the shelf behind her. It hit the concrete floor with the full-throated crash of 40 pounds of metal finding hard ground. The sound exploded through the barn walls, sharp and sudden and total. Ranger was on his feet before the echo reached the ceiling. One bark. Single. Controlled. The kind of sound that does not ask permission. And Holt's boot was already moving. The kick was not violent. It was worse than violent. It was casual. A deliberate, contemptuous press of his boot into Ranger's ribs, like he was nudging furniture out of the way. A statement dressed up as nothing. The kind of thing someone does when they want the other person to understand who has the power in the room, without leaving a mark that can be photographed. Ranger went absolutely still. Not in pain, not in confusion. He locked down the way a loaded weapon locks when the safety is engaged. His spine went rigid. His head dropped 2 inches. His paws widened into the concrete, and his amber eyes moved up to Holt's center mass and stopped moving. The barn went dead quiet. Holt looked down at the dog and then up at Raina with an expression that expected fear and found something else entirely. Raina took 1 step forward. Her voice came out low and even and completely without theater. "Step away from him." Mercer's grin flickered. Dax lowered his clipboard by 3 inches. Holt did not step away. He tilted his head and smiled the smile of a man who had just decided he was not going to be told what to do by a 22-year-old in cargo pants. And Ranger kept watching him, perfectly still, perfectly silent. The kind of silence that has a shape and a weight and a temperature. And every person in that barn could feel exactly what it was made of. Holt had made a mistake, and he didn't know it yet. That was the most dangerous part. Not the kick, not the smirk still sitting on his face like he'd earned it. The most dangerous part was that he genuinely believed the situation was still his. That belief was going to cost him something, and the only question left was exactly how much. Raina didn't move toward him. She didn't raise her voice. She stood exactly where she was and watched Ranger the way a pilot watches an instrument panel during turbulence. Not panicked, not performing calm, actually reading the data. Ranger's breathing had stopped. His chest was a wall. His jaw was closed so tight that the muscle along his cheekbone had surfaced visibly beneath the fur. Every trained handler knows that moment. It is not the moment before a dog attacks. It is the moment a system stops calculating options and selects one. Holt read none of it. "He always stare like that?" he said. "Or is this the part where he does a trick?" Mercer snorted. Dax didn't. Dax had taken 2 steps back without appearing to notice he'd done it. "I'm not going to tell you again," Raina said. "Move away from him." Holt spread his hands like he was surrendering to something ridiculous. "Lady, I barely touched him. If your dog can't handle a little contact, maybe he shouldn't be at a public event." "He handled it fine," Raina said. "That's what I'm trying to explain to you." Something in the way she said it made Mercer stop smiling. The sentence didn't sound like a defense. It sounded like a warning label. Holt stepped to the side, not away from Ranger, but around him, circling slightly, the way someone moves when they want to feel like they chose to relocate rather than retreat. He crossed his arms and tilted his head at Raina with an expression she had seen before. The expression of a man who has decided that the best move now is to make the other person feel small enough to leave on their own. "What exactly is your deal?" he said. "You show up with a dog in a tactical vest, wave around a laminated card, and act like that makes you untouchable. You're at a county fair. Your brother is welding a metal bracket in front of a panel of judges. Nobody here is impressed." Raina looked at him for a long moment. "I'm not trying to impress anyone." "Then act like it. Take your dog and go wait outside like everyone else." "I was told to wait in this room." "By who?" "The stage coordinator. I already said that." Holt pulled his radio off his belt and made a performance of keying it. The call went out. There was a pause. A woman's voice came back confirming that, yes, family members of competitors waiting for the East Corridor entry were cleared to wait in the prep barn until the side entrance opened. The radio crackled quiet. Holt clipped it back on his belt. His jaw shifted. "You could have just shown me a text," he said. "You could have just asked," Raina replied. The temperature in the room changed again. Dax had drifted all the way to the far wall and was now very focused on the corner of his clipboard. Mercer cleared his throat. "Holt," Mercer said quietly. "We should probably—" "We're fine," Holt said. He wasn't looking at Mercer. He was looking at Ranger. "I just want to understand something. This dog, what exactly is he trained to do?" "Whatever I tell him to," Raina said. "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer you need." Holt crouched down. Not close enough to reach Ranger, but close enough to be a provocation. To put himself at eye level with an animal whose eyes had not moved from his center mass since the kick. It was the kind of move that either came from genuine ignorance or a need to prove something in front of an audience of two. Raina couldn't tell which. It didn't matter which. "Hey," Holt said to Ranger, like you'd talk to a dog you thought you were smarter than. "Hey, boy." Ranger did not move, did not blink, did not acknowledge the sound in any way that suggested he was a boy or that Holt had any standing to address him. Holt looked up at Raina. "He broken?" "No," she said. "He's reading you." "Reading me?" Holt stood back up. "Right." Mercer tried again. "Seriously, man, we got 3 more walkthroughs before the ceremony. We should—" "2 minutes," Holt said. He walked toward the supply shelf along the back wall, hands in his pockets, casual, like he was just stretching his legs. He stopped near a metal equipment cart and leaned against it. Ranger's head turned 4 degrees to track him. That was all. "So where'd you serve?" Holt said. Raina said nothing. "I'm asking a genuine question. Where'd you serve?" "That's not your business." "It is if you're claiming your dog has special standing." He gestured at Ranger's vest. "Joint Special Operations. That's what it says in your card, right?" I looked it up. "That's Navy. You're telling me you're Navy?" Raina still said nothing. Holt spread his arms slightly, half a laugh in his posture. "You're what, 22? 23? And you're telling me this dog has been through Joint Special Operations Canine deployment?" He turned to Mercer. "You buying that?" Mercer said nothing this time. "I'm not asking you to buy anything," Raina said. "I'm asking you to leave us alone." Holt walked back toward the center of the room. He was moving differently now, the performance of calm he'd been maintaining starting to slip at the edges, replaced by something smaller and sharper. The thing people reach for when they realize the room hasn't gone the way they intended. "Here's my issue," he said. "You walk in here like you own something. You flash credentials that could be printed off any website. You let your dog bark in an enclosed space full of kids and act like I'm the problem for saying something about it. And now you're standing here looking at me like I should be worried." He stopped 2 feet from Ranger. "I'm not worried." Ranger exhaled once. One slow, measured breath. Raina recognized it immediately. Her hand moved before she finished the thought. "Halt!" Her voice was sharp for the first time. "Do not take another step." Holt frowned. "I'm standing still." "Your right foot just moved." He looked down. His right foot had shifted forward by approximately 3 inches. He hadn't noticed. The room was completely silent. Dax was against the wall with his arms crossed and his clipboard held against his chest like a shield. Mercer was near the door, one hand on the handle, not turning it, just resting there the way people stand when they're calculating how fast they can leave without making it obvious that's what they're doing. Holt looked at Ranger, and something finally began to register. Not the vest, not the documentation, the stillness, the precision. The fact that this animal had been kicked, had been crouched over, had been spoken to like a prop, and had not offered a single uncontrolled response. Not one. That didn't happen with regular dogs. That didn't even happen with most trained dogs. "What is he?" Holt said slowly. Not a question anymore. More like a sentence he was still building. "Retired Special Operations Canine," Reyna said. "Former joint deployment. 3 active tours. I was his handler for all of them." The silence that followed that sentence had a different quality than the silence before it. Mercer let go of the door handle. Dax put the clipboard down on the supply cart without looking at it. Holt stood with his arms at his sides and stared at Ranger with the expression of a man who has just done the arithmetic on a situation he entered with the wrong variables. His face didn't collapse. It just went very flat. The smirk was gone. The performance was gone. What was left underneath was something much more ordinary and much less comfortable. "He didn't say that earlier," he said. "He didn't ask," Reyna said. "You assumed." "I didn't—" He stopped, started again. "I didn't know. The vest told you. The card told you. Ranger told you." Reyna's voice was not cruel. It was something harder than cruel. It was accurate. "You chose not to hear any of it, because you decided before you walked over to us at that gate that you already knew everything you needed to know about who I was." Holt opened his mouth. A sound from outside cut through the barn wall. The PA system crackled to life beyond the curtain, and the voice announced the start of the Junior Division ceremony. Cole's name was in the first group called to the stage. Holt looked toward the sound, then back at Reyna. Ranger had not moved. His eyes had not left Holt's center mass. His breath was still measured, still controlled. He was waiting. Not for permission. For necessity. And Holt, for the first time since he had walked through that door, understood the difference between those two things. He took one step back, then another. "We'll finish the walkthrough," he said to Mercer, his voice stripped of everything it had carried 20 minutes ago. He turned toward the door, and that was the moment Dax, trying to close the gap between himself and the exit, cut too close behind Reyna, his shoulder catching hers as he moved past. Not violent, not even intentional, just the careless displacement of a body that had stopped thinking about the space it occupied. Reyna didn't stumble. She didn't react at all. But Ranger moved. Not a lunge, not a sound, just a single precise step, cutting across the floor between Reyna and Dax, body dropping 2 inches, head forward, amber eyes locking on Dax's forearm, with the kind of focus that leaves no room for misinterpretation. Dax froze mid-step, like the air had become something solid. Nobody breathed. Reyna said one word. "Ranger." He stopped, held position, waiting. Dax stood absolutely still with his arms suspended at a 30-degree angle and his face the color of chalk. His mouth was open. Nothing was coming out of it. "Move," Reyna said to him quietly. "Slowly. Toward the door." Dax moved slowly toward the door. Holt and Mercer were already through it. Ranger held his position until all 3 of them were gone. Then he returned to Raina's left side and sat. Clean. Automatic. Like a period at the end of a sentence that had said everything it needed to say. Raina looked at the closed door for a moment. Then she exhaled. The PA called Cole's name again. First place, Junior Division. She picked up Ranger's lead from the floor and walked toward the side entrance. The side entrance opened to the edge of the spectator area, and the noise hit Raina like a change in pressure. Applause, a PA system crackling through announcements, the shuffling of chairs, and the low, steady murmur of a crowd that had no idea what had just happened, 30 feet away, behind a steel wall. Ranger moved through it without flinching. His breathing was normal again. His ears tracked the crowd noise and filed it the way he filed everything that wasn't a threat. Processed, categorized, released. Raina found a standing position along the side barrier and watched Cole receive his first-place ribbon. He held it up and looked for her immediately, scanning the crowd the way he always had since he was 7 years old, needing to confirm she was actually there before he let himself feel the full weight of a good thing. She raised one hand. He grinned and looked back at the judges. She let herself breathe for the first time in 20 minutes. Ranger sat at her heel and leaned slightly against her left leg. Not dramatically, not the way dogs do in movies, just a slight shift of weight, warm and steady, the animal equivalent of checking in. She reached down without looking and rested her hand on the back of his neck for 3 seconds. That was enough for both of them. The ceremony ran another 40 minutes. She stood through all of it. When Cole came through the competitor exit with his ribbon and his teammates, he was talking fast and loose the way he did when adrenaline was still working through his system. He recapped the judging, the scoring, the moment he thought he'd made a critical error on the third weld and recovered it. He talked with his hands. He laughed at his own story. He was 17, and he had just won something, and the whole world felt like it was in the right order. Raina listened to every word. It was only when his teammates split off toward the parking lot, and the two of them were walking alone toward the east exit, that Cole slowed down and looked at her sideways. Something happened, didn't it? It wasn't a question. "We handled it," she said. "We, meaning you and Ranger." "We, meaning Ranger and me, yes." Cole looked down at Ranger and then back at his sister. He had grown up watching her pack gear she couldn't name, come home from places she couldn't describe, carry a silence that had weight and texture and took up space in a room. He had learned young that there were parts of her life that operated on a different frequency than the one most people could hear. "Are you okay?" he asked. "I'm fine." "Is he okay?" Ranger glanced up at the sound of the pronoun. Cole had always talked about him like a person. Ranger had always treated Cole like a non-threat worth mild acknowledgement. It was the closest thing to affection that Ranger offered civilians, and Cole had always understood that it was significant. "He's fine," Raina said. "He did his job." Cole nodded slowly. He wasn't going to push. He had learned that, too. They were 15 steps from the east exit when Holt stepped back into the story. He came from the left, from the direction of the security station near the main gate. He wasn't alone. He had Mercer with him, and there was a third man Raina hadn't seen before. Older, heavier, with a supervisor's badge and the expression of someone who had been handed a complaint and wanted it resolved before the end of his shift. The supervisor's name tag read, Patterson. "Ma'am," Patterson said, holding up a hand, "can we take a moment?" Raina stopped. Cole stopped beside her. Ranger's ears moved forward. "We've had a report," Patterson said, "of an aggressive animal incident in the prep area." Raina looked at him, then at Holt. Holt was standing slightly behind Patterson's left shoulder, arms crossed, jaw set, his expression carefully arranged into something that read as cooperative concern and was neither. An aggressive animal incident, Raina repeated. Your dog apparently made threatening contact with one of our security personnel. No, Raina said. He didn't. Patterson pulled out a small notepad. We have a witness account stating the animal lunged at a staff member. He didn't lunge, Raina said. He intercepted a close contact displacement. There was no bite, no broken skin, no injury of any kind. Mercer said, from behind Patterson. He was on Dax before any of us could react. Because Dax walked through my space without looking, Raina said. Ranger positioned between us. That's protective protocol. That's exactly what he's trained to do. Patterson wrote something on his notepad. He's trained to position aggressively towards staff. He's trained to protect his handler when a body enters the engagement threshold without warning. That's not aggression. That's response discipline. Cole had gone very still beside her. He wasn't speaking. He understood somehow that the best thing he could do right now was hold his ground and not give the situation any more variables. Patterson looked at Ranger. Ranger looked at Patterson with the same amber, unreadable patience he offered everyone who wasn't a direct threat. I'm going to need your documentation again, Patterson said. Raina produced the card. Patterson actually read it this time. His eyes moved across it twice. Then he looked up. Former Joint Special Operations K-9 Unit, he said. Correct. And you were the assigned handler? For 3 deployments, yes. Patterson looked at the card one more time. Looked at Holt. Holt's expression had not changed, but something behind it had shifted. The way the foundation of a building shifts before the surface shows a crack. Why wasn't this disclosed at the initial entry point? Patterson asked. It was, Raina said. I showed this card to your officer at the pavilion gate 90 minutes ago. He looked at it and cleared us through. Patterson turned to Holt. Is that accurate? Holt said nothing for exactly 1 beat too long. I cleared them through on the documentation, he said. But there were subsequent incidents that... What subsequent incidents? Raina said. Her voice was still level, but it had the quality of something being pulled very tight. Your officer kicked my K-9 in a secured prep room. That is the incident. Everything else is the response to that incident. The word kicked landed in the space between all of them, like something dropped from a height. Patterson's pen stopped moving. Mercer looked at the ground. Holt's jaw shifted. I did not kick him. I nudged him away from... You drove your boot into his ribs, Raina said. Deliberately. In a closed room with no other witnesses present. While your colleague was recording on his phone. She paused. I'd check whether that recording is still on his device. Everyone looked at Dax, who had appeared at the edge of the group sometime in the last 30 seconds, and was now holding his phone against his leg with the particular rigid stillness of someone who has just realized they are the most important person in the room for all the wrong reasons. Patterson turned to Dax. Give me your phone. I didn't. Give me your phone, son. Dax handed it over. Patterson scrolled. His expression didn't change, but the quality of his silence changed considerably. He watched something on the screen for approximately 12 seconds. Then he turned the phone toward Raina. It was a vertical video, shaky, partially obstructed by the angle, but it showed enough. The equipment case coming off the shelf, Ranger's single bark, the deliberate, unhurried motion of Holt's foot connecting with Ranger's ribs, and then Ranger locking down, the entire room going dead still. Raina's voice, sharp and clear even through the compressed audio. Step away from him. Patterson turned the phone back. He didn't look at Holt. He looked at his notepad, then closed it. I need to make a call, he said. He stepped away from the group and put his phone to his ear. The 5 of them stood in the space Patterson had vacated. Cole's ribbon was still in his hand. He had stopped looking at his sister and was now looking at Holt with an expression that Raina recognized because she had worn it herself at 17, when she first understood that some people use authority the way a bad driver uses a horn, not to navigate, but to assert. Holt looked at Raina. The architecture of his face had finally given up on the performance. What was underneath was smaller than she expected. Not evil, just ordinary. Just a man who had made a series of choices in an empty room and was now standing in the open air, watching those choices assemble themselves into a shape he couldn't walk away from. "I didn't know," he said. "You knew he was a working canine," Raina said. "You knew I had documentation. You knew he was responding to a stimulus your colleague created deliberately. You knew all of that." She said it without heat, without satisfaction. Just the way you state coordinates. What you chose not to know is a different conversation. Holt looked at Ranger. Ranger was sitting at Raina's heel, watching Holt with the patient, unblinking focus of an animal that had already resolved the situation internally and was simply waiting for the humans to finish their portion of it. "He's not going to forget me, is he?" Holt said. It wasn't quite a question. "He doesn't forget anyone he's assessed," Raina said. Something moved across Holt's face that was the closest thing to genuine he had shown all afternoon. Not remorse, exactly. More like recognition. The specific discomfort of a man who has just understood, too late, that he misread an entire situation from beginning to end, and that his confidence was the mechanism of the misreading. Patterson came back. He had the look of someone who had just been given information on a call that reorganized his understanding of the last 2 hours. "I spoke with our legal coordinator," he said, "and with the regional office that oversees contracted security personnel." He looked at Holt. Deliberately striking a certified working animal with federal documentation constitutes a chargeable offense under state and federal statute. That's not my determination. That's theirs. Holt's arms uncrossed. "Now," Patterson continued, turning to Raina, "it is ultimately your decision whether you want to pursue this formally. But I want you to know that this department will not be impeding that process in any direction." Raina looked at him for a moment. Then she looked at Ranger. Ranger was looking at Holt, not with menace, not with anything that could be named as emotion. Just that steady, complete attention that said he had measured the threat, had responded to the threat, and had already moved past the threat, and was now simply doing what trained working dogs do in the silence after an incident. Observing, recording, waiting to be needed again. Cole leaned slightly toward his sister and said quietly, "What are you going to do?" Raina looked at Holt one more time. He was standing very still. His badge was still on his lanyard. His radio was still on his belt. But all the authority he had walked into this fairground wearing had been stripped off him, one layer at a time, over the course of 2 hours. And what was left was just a man in a polo shirt who had kicked a dog in an empty room because he thought no one who mattered was watching. "Ranger already handled it," she said. Patterson nodded. "I'll file the internal report regardless." "I know," Raina said. "Thank you." She looked at Cole. He was reading her face, the way he had been reading it since childhood, looking for the thing underneath the thing she said out loud. She gave him a small nod. He exhaled. "You want to get out of here?" he asked. "Yeah," she said. "I really do." She touched her thigh once. Ranger rose from his sit in a single clean motion and fell in at her left heel. They walked toward the east exit without looking back. Behind them, Patterson was already speaking to Holt in the low, formal tone of someone beginning a process that does not end today. Cole matched his sister's stride. After a moment, he looked down at Ranger. "He really doesn't forget people, does he?" "No," Raina said. "He doesn't." Cole was quiet for a few steps. Then, almost to himself, "Good." They made it as far as the parking lot before Cole's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, frowned, and held it up toward his sister. Unknown number. Local area code. Raina nodded once, and he answered it on speaker. "This is Cole, Voss." "Mr. Voss, this is Marcus Tate, Fairground Shift Supervisor. I apologize for reaching you directly. I got your number from the competitor registration form. I'm calling because I need to speak with your sister before she leaves the property. It's important." Cole looked at Raina. She held his gaze for a moment and then said, "This is Raina." A brief pause on the other end. When Marcus Tate spoke again, his voice had shifted register slightly. Not softer, more precise. "Lieutenant Voss, I served 12 years with the 75th Ranger Regiment before I transitioned out. I know what a Joint Special Operations Canine credential looks like, and I know what it means. I've been reviewing the security footage from the prep barn for the last 20 minutes. Another pause. "I owe you an apology on behalf of this facility, and I need you to come back inside." Raina said nothing for 2 seconds. "Why?" she asked. "Because Holt just filed a counter-report claiming your animal initiated unprovoked aggression. And if you leave this property before we document your account, that report becomes the only official record of what happened today." The parking lot was quiet around them. Cole had stopped walking. Ranger sat automatically at Raina's heel, ears forward, reading the tension in her posture, the way he read everything. Accurately, completely, without drama. "How long will it take?" she asked. 30 minutes, maybe less." She looked at Cole. He shrugged with his whole body, the kind of shrug that meant, "Whatever you decide, I'm with you." "We're coming back in," she said. Marcus Tate was waiting at the east entrance when they returned. He was exactly what his voice had suggested. Late 40s, close-cut gray at his temples, built like a man who still held himself to a physical standard nobody was requiring of him. He looked at Ranger first, the way veterans always did when they encountered a working canine. Not with curiosity, with recognition. He extended his hand to Raina. "Marcus Tate." "Raina Voss." He nodded at Ranger. "What's his name?" "Ranger." Marcus looked at Ranger for a moment with an expression that was quiet and genuine and had nothing performative in it. "Good name," he said. Then he turned and led them inside. The security office was a small room off the main administrative corridor. 2 monitors on a desk displayed camera feeds from across the fairgrounds. A third monitor had been paused on a still image from the prep barn footage, the exact moment Holt's foot made contact with Ranger's ribs. Patterson was already there, standing near the far wall with his notepad open. He looked at Raina when she entered and gave a short, serious nod that acknowledged everything without requiring it to be stated. Marcus sat at the desk and pulled up the full footage sequence. He walked through it methodically, time-stamped, unambiguous. The equipment case coming off the shelf. The bark. The kick. The lockdown. The escalation. Dax's close contact displacement. Ranger's intercept. Raina's command. The immediate release. He watched it the way a man watches something he needs to understand fully before he speaks about it. When it finished, he sat back in his chair. "That dog ran a textbook protective protocol," he said. "Every response was proportional. Every release was immediate. There was not a single moment in that footage where his behavior was uncontrolled." He looked at Raina. "How many deployments?" "3, she said. 2 overseas, 1 domestic joint operation." "And he's been retired how long?" 14 months. Marcus nodded slowly. "Still working, though?" It wasn't a question. He had seen Ranger's posture in the footage, and he was drawing the same conclusion any trained observer would draw. This animal had not been sitting in a suburban backyard for 14 months. He was still sharp, still calibrated, still running every environmental scan the same way he had run them in active operation. Some dogs decompressed after retirement. Ranger had simply transferred his operational focus to a single, consistent assignment: Raina. "The counter-report Holt filed," Patterson said, addressing Raina directly, "claims that the canine lunged at a staff member without provocation during a routine security walkthrough. He's framing the barn interaction as a welfare check that became dangerous." "The footage shows what happened," Raina said. "It does," Marcus said, "and I've already forwarded it to our legal team and to the regional contracting office that employs Holt's security company." He paused. "What I need from you is a formal statement, on the record. Your account, in your words, beginning from the gate interaction this morning." Raina gave the statement. She spoke for 11 minutes without interruption. She was precise and chronological, and she did not editorialize. She described what was said, what was done, and what Ranger responded to, and why. She used the correct technical terminology for each of Ranger's behavioral responses, and she explained, calmly and without asking for credit, what those responses indicated about his training level and his discipline. Patterson wrote everything down. Marcus watched her speak with the focused attention of someone cross-referencing what he was hearing against what he had seen in the footage, checking for consistency, finding it everywhere. When she finished, Patterson looked up from his notepad. "One question," he said. "When Holt kicked the animal, you gave the command to stay. You chose to de-escalate rather than allow Ranger to respond. Why?" The room was quiet. Cole was leaning against the wall near the door, with his ribbon still in his hand, his whole body attentive, in the way of someone watching a conversation that is teaching them something they didn't know they needed to learn. Raina considered the question for a moment. "Because Holt didn't understand what he was dealing with," she said. "And a response Ranger wasn't controlled for would have confirmed every assumption he walked in with, that we were a liability, that the dog was dangerous, that we didn't belong there." She paused. "Ranger operating within his training proves the opposite of all of that." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "That's good judgment under pressure," he said quietly. "It's his training," she said. "I just have to be worthy of it." The door opened and a woman stepped in, mid-50s, in a facility management blazer, reading something on a tablet with the brisk energy of someone who has been handed a situation and is already 3 steps into resolving it. She looked at the frozen footage on the monitor, then at Patterson's notepad, then at Raina. "You're the handler," she said. "Yes. I'm Director Calloway. I oversee facility operations." She set the tablet down on the desk and looked at Raina directly. "I've reviewed the footage, the documentation, and the incident timeline. Holt and his contracted security company will be suspended from this facility pending a full investigation. That process begins today." She paused. "I also want to know if there is anything this facility can do for you and your animal before you leave." The sentence landed differently than Raina expected. She had been ready for more bureaucracy, more forms, more questions, more careful institutional language designed to acknowledge without accepting. She had not been ready for a direct question asked by someone who was actually looking at her when they asked it. She looked at Director Calloway for a moment, then at Ranger. He had been sitting at her heel through the entire meeting, through every statement and every question, and every review of footage that showed someone hurting him. He had not shifted, had not reacted, had not asked for anything. "He needs to have his ribs checked," she said. "There's no visible injury, but he should be assessed." Director Calloway nodded immediately. "We have a veterinary first responder on site for the livestock exhibitions. I'll have her come here." The vet arrived 12 minutes later. She was a compact woman in her 30s, named Dr. Finch, who introduced herself to Ranger before she touched him, which immediately raised her standing in Raina's estimation considerably. Ranger tolerated the examination with the complete professional stillness he brought to everything. Weight-bearing on all four legs, breathing measured, eyes tracking, but not alarmed. Dr. Finch pressed carefully along his rib cage, checking for heat, swelling, irregularity. She moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had done this hundreds of times, on animals that couldn't tell her where it hurt. After 2 minutes, she sat back. No fractures, no swelling. Minor soft tissue contact, but nothing that needs treatment. He's in excellent condition. She looked at Raina. Whoever trained him did exceptional work. He trained himself, Raina said. I just followed his lead. Dr. Finch smiled briefly, recognizing the deflection for what it was, and stood. Cole, from his place near the wall, said quietly, "Is he okay?" "He's fine," Raina said. Cole exhaled and looked at the ceiling for a moment with the specific expression of someone releasing something they didn't want to name out loud. Marcus walked them out through the east corridor. At the exit, he stopped and turned to Raina. He had something in his expression that wasn't entirely professional. It was the thing veterans carry when they recognize the weight someone else is holding because they have held it themselves. "You handled today exactly right," he said. "Every call." "Ranger made most of them," she said. Marcus looked down at Ranger one more time. Ranger looked back at him with those amber eyes that recorded everything and judged nothing and forgot no one. "He know how good he is?" Marcus asked. "He knows what his job is," Raina said. "That's enough for him." Marcus nodded. He held the door for them without ceremony, the way one soldier holds a door for another. Not deference, just acknowledgement. Outside, the fairground had shifted into its late afternoon rhythm, slower, easier, the competition crowds thinning, and the families settling into the end of a day that had been ordinary for almost everyone present. The air was cooler now. The generator noise had leveled to a background hum. Cole walked beside his sister. He had been quiet since the security office, processing the afternoon in the way he processed most things, slowly and without asking for help until he was ready. After a while, he said, "I keep thinking about what you said in there." "Which part?" "That you have to be worthy of his training." He looked at Ranger. "Do you think he knows that? That you think about it that way?" Raina considered that for a moment longer than most questions required. "I think he knows whether I show up or I don't," she said. "Every single day. He knows." Cole turned that over. "That's a high bar," he said. "Yeah," she said. "It is." Ranger walked between them, stride easy now, ears relaxed. The full operational alertness of the afternoon quietly downshifted into something that was still watchful, but no longer waiting. The threat had been resolved. The handler was steady. The work was done. For now. They reached Raina's truck at the far end of the parking lot, just as the last of the afternoon light was going flat and gold across the top of the fairground structures. Cole had stopped talking, not because there was nothing left to say, but because he had reached the particular quiet that follows a day that changed something in you without asking permission first. Raina opened the back door of the truck. Ranger jumped in and turned a single circle before settling. She closed the door and stood with her hand on it for a moment, not moving, just holding the solidity of it. Cole leaned against the passenger side and looked at her over the roof. "You're not okay," he said. "I'm fine." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." Raina. He said her name the way he had said it since he was 12 years old and knew the difference between the things she told him and the things she was actually feeling. You don't have to be fine right now. Nobody's grading you. She looked at him across the roof of the truck. Her dark hair had come slightly loose from behind her shoulder in the wind. She didn't fix it. He could have responded the moment Holt kicked him, she said. Ranger. He had full grounds, full standing. Everything in his training authorized an immediate response, and he held because I told him to hold. She paused. And I keep thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't been fast enough. If I'd been half a second slower giving that command. Cole was quiet. He would have protected you, he said. Yes, she said. And then every person in that building would have seen a canine take down a security contractor, and the only story anyone would have told is the one Holt already tried to file. She opened the driver's door. The truth only won today because Ranger was better than the situation required him to be. Cole got in and closed his door, and sat with that for a while. They drove in silence for the first few minutes, the fairground receding behind them, the radio off. Ranger lay in the back, with his chin on his paws and his amber eyes tracking the movement of light through the rear window, the way he tracked everything, without urgency, without rest. Cole turned his ribbon over in his hands. I didn't know, he said, when I sent you those texts, that it was going to turn into all of this. It wasn't your fault. I know, He stopped. I forget sometimes what your life actually is. Like, I know it in theory. I know you deploy. I know what the unit does. I know Ranger is not a regular dog. But then I see it happen in real life, and I realize I only knew the outline of it, not the actual thing. Raina kept her eyes on the road. Most people only know the outline, she said. That's usually fine. It's not fine when someone like Holt decides the outline is all there is. She said nothing for a moment. No, she said. It's not. They stopped at a light 3 blocks from Cole's apartment. A woman crossed in front of them, pushing a stroller, unhurried, talking on the phone, completely unaware of the truck or the people inside it, or the dog in the back, who had held a military protocol under direct provocation approximately 2 hours earlier. The ordinary world moving at its ordinary pace. Cole watched the woman cross. Can I ask you something? He said. You're going to ask it regardless. When Dax brushed past you and Ranger intercepted, what were you feeling in that second, before you gave the command? Raina's hands shifted on the steering wheel. Relief, she said. Cole turned to look at her. Not that it happened, she said. That he was already there. That I didn't have to calculate it or decide it. He had already decided. Before I finished the thought, he was already between me and the problem. She paused. That's 14 months out of active deployment, and he still moves like we never left. The light changed. She drove. Cole looked out the window. Do you miss it? He asked. Deployment. Every day, she said. And not at all. Both things are true simultaneously. Cole nodded. He understood that kind of answer, even if he couldn't fully map it yet. He was 17, and he had a first-place ribbon and a story he was going to be telling for years, and a sister whose life operated on a frequency he was only beginning to hear clearly. Her phone buzzed in the cup holder. She glanced at it. Marcus Tate. She put it on speaker. Tate? Lieutenant Voss, I wanted to update you before the end of the day. His voice had the same precise, unhurried quality it had carried in the security office. Holt's contractor company has been formally suspended from all facility contracts pending investigation. Holt specifically has been placed on administrative hold. The counter-report he filed has been flagged as contradicted by physical evidence and will not be entered into the official record. Thank you, Raina said. There's something else. A brief pause. The regional coordinator for contracted security personnel reviewed your documentation and Ranger's service record this afternoon. They're recommending your incident be submitted as a training case study for canine behavioral response under provocation. Raina blinked once. A case study, she said. Your words in the security office. The explanation of proportional response. The distinction between protective protocol and aggression. Apparently their certification trainers want to use it. He paused again. You explained something in 11 minutes that most handlers can't articulate in a full training session. Cole was looking at his sister with an expression she didn't have a name for immediately. It was something between pride and wonder, and the particular look of someone watching a person they love be seen accurately by the world for the first time. She kept her voice steady. Ranger did the explaining, she said. I just translated. Marcus made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but carried the warmth of one. I'll be in touch with the formal paperwork, he said. You have a good evening, Lieutenant. The call ended. Cole said nothing for 10 seconds. Then, a case study. Don't. I'm not doing anything. I'm just a case study. Cole, I'm just sitting here being normal. She looked at him sideways. He was grinning at the windshield with the complete unguarded happiness of a little brother who has just watched his sister be recognized for something real, and he was trying very hard to pretend he wasn't. She let him have it. She pulled up in front of his apartment building and put the truck in park. Cole gathered his jacket and his ribbon and his competition folder, and then sat for a moment without getting out. Hey, he said. She waited. I know you said Ranger handled it, and I know you meant it. He looked at the ribbon in his hands. But you handled it too. You held the line the whole time. You kept it from becoming something worse than it was. That was you. He looked at her. I just want to make sure you know that I know that. Raina held his gaze. Something moved through her that she didn't put a name to. It settled somewhere between her sternum and her throat, and stayed there, warm and steady, the way things stay when they are true. Go inside, she said. Cole smiled. He opened the door and climbed out, and then leaned back in through the window. Good boy, Ranger, he said. From the back seat, Ranger lifted his head and looked at Cole with those amber eyes for exactly 2 seconds. Then he put his chin back on his paws. Cole laughed and pushed off the door and walked toward his building. Raina pulled back into traffic. The drive home took 20 minutes. She ran through it once in her mind. The gate, the barn, the kick, the hold, the release, the counter report. The footage, Patterson's notepad, Marcus Tate's voice on the phone. The way Director Calloway had looked at her when she asked what the facility could do. The way Dr. Finch had introduced herself to Ranger before she touched him. The way Holt had said, I didn't know, with all the architecture of his performance finally gone. She had not hated him for it. That was the part she kept returning to. She had expected to feel something hotter than what she actually felt, which was the specific, flat exhaustion of being right about something you wish you'd been wrong about. She had known from the gate that Holt was going to be a problem. She had known from the moment he looked at Ranger with that particular expression that he had already decided what they were. And she had been right. And being right had cost her 2 hours of her life, and approximately 1 full deployment's worth of controlled restraint. She pulled into her driveway and cut the engine. Ranger was already sitting up in the back, reading her posture through the headrest the way he always did when they arrived somewhere, checking whether this was a deployment stop or an actual stop. We're home, she said. He waited for her to open the door. She did. He jumped down and stood in the driveway and looked at her. She unlatched the side buckle of his vest and eased it off. She set it on the back seat and then ran both hands along his ribs, slow and thorough, not checking for injury this time. Just contact. Just acknowledgement. He stood perfectly still and let her. "You held today," she said quietly. "Every single time. You held." Ranger leaned forward and pressed his forehead against her shoulder, the same way he had learned to do during his second deployment, when the only thing that reset both of them was stillness. Forehead to shoulder, weight to weight. The world on pause for exactly as long as it needed to be. She closed her eyes and let it ground her. When she straightened, he stepped back and sat, clean, automatic, present, watching her with those eyes that recorded everything, judged nothing, and forgot no one who had ever stood in front of them with something to prove. She picked up his vest from the back seat and carried it inside. Some people would spend the rest of their lives telling themselves that what happened in that barn was nothing, that it was a dog and a woman and a misunderstanding that got sorted out by a video and a supervisor and a piece of paperwork, that no one got seriously hurt, and therefore the story had no real weight. Those people would be wrong. Because what happened in that barn was not about a kick. It was about the oldest question that gets asked whenever someone with authority and no accountability decides to test the limits of someone they have already decided doesn't matter. It was about what happens when the answer to that question is not a complaint filed in triplicate, not an argument won on points, not a scene made in front of witnesses. It was about what happens when the answer is a dog who was trained by people who understood something most people never learn, that control is not weakness, that restraint is not submission, that the most dangerous thing in any room is not the loudest voice or the heaviest boot. It is the one who waits and holds and moves only when it is necessary and stops the moment it is done. Ranger had proven that today, and anyone who had been in that barn already knew it. In the way Holt's hand had shaken when he pressed it to his wrist. In the way Dax had stood frozen with his arms suspended in the air. In the way Mercer had reached for the door handle before he was done deciding whether to leave. They had come in thinking they were the authority in the room. They had left knowing exactly what authority looks like when it has nothing left to prove.